What if everything you thought and believed about successful buying, selling, and financing your home was wrong? Welcome to HomeWise with Michael Miget. This is where you can count on straightforward, objective advice on the right way to make the most out of every dollar you put into your home. Whether it's buying, selling, or financing, even maintaining and growing its value along the way. Coming to you from the News Talk STL studios at Union Station in St. Louis, here's your host, Michael Miget.
Thank you so much for listening. Yes, indeed, it's HomeWise Radio with Michael Miget. I can't believe we are at show number 8. We've had a few great months here, buddy. How are you, Mr. Michael Miget?
I'm doing great, Paul. How are you?
Really good. I've learned so much, and like a little, kind of like a child. What was it like? Abraham Lincoln said, "Speak to me like a third grader," or something kind of like that. I feel that way. You haven't done that, but I feel like that's the way I've learned. Like
I'm aiming for that. Okay. I mean, it's interesting. Abraham Lincoln, he was a great communicator.
Mm-hmm.
Books, whole like an encyclopedia's worth of information been recorded about him.
Mm-hmm.
His ability to communicate. That's one of the things that made him great at what he did at the time. So it's a great person to try and emulate. And this is it's personal financial information directed at housing. Personal finance, as you know, I believe the family home is the epicenter of the personal financial situation. And so that makes it important. And so the decisions you make wrapped around that, from experience, I find that, I just don't think they're given the weight that they could be. And so statistically, 83% of personal wealth winds up in or represented by home equity in the family home at retirement. More than any other, by far more than any other source. And, it's not the kind of thing where when you get there, you're like, oh, I didn't hit my mark. It's just kind of like it is what it is. And so that theme of, making the wrong decision, right? It's a dangerous kind of wrong. It's the kind of
there's a fear there.
Really knows wrong. Because nobody shows up at the end and says, hey, guess what? You could have done this or should have done this. And you see what that number is. And, those decisions, those outcomes, they compound over time. And so how much you put down on a house, how much you finance, the way you finance it, the structuring, all of that matters. What you pay, what you sell for, when you pay, who you choose to help you do those things, right? It's a whole list of professional service providers and that get hired to do various jobs through that. Most of the time, I don't see people taking, it's not that they don't take it seriously, but how do you choose? I mean, it's difficult to choose. In mortgage land, we talk about, I coach about how do you differentiate yourself from other people in the market? Because when you're part of the group, when you're in the group, you start to lose sight of what it looks like, what you look like from the outside. And so I constantly go back and I remind them, we like sitting here in the room, we know the difference between each other. I know how I'm different from you. I know how I'm better than this guy, or whatever. But turn that table around to a consumer who doesn't know anything about all of this. And it's not their job to know it. Okay. It's our job to know it. But talk to a few consumers, they can't tell the difference.
Some of them go at it alone.
They can't.
They don't.
They can't. Right. They
get
can't.
The help.
They can't tell the difference. So they take whatever referral they can get. They take. Who did you use? Who did I use last time? Who did my neighbor use? Who did my brother-in-law use? Oh, I got a brother-in-law in the business. And and that's kind of like the extent of how they pick. So there are just some tweaks, some decisions that could be made better. That change that benefit compounds throughout the entire life that you're going to own this, and then you end up with what you end up with at the end. So the idea is just make better decisions, and that's what I'm here to help you with. So back to the original point of Abraham Lincoln and simplifying it down to what a third grader can understand.
Yeah,
that is honestly what I'm striving for, but. I'm also not the kind of person that gets accused of oversimplifying things very often, so we're working on all that.
That's great. That's great. And I know there are limitations to radio. I'm so glad we're here and online at HomeWiseRadio.com, but there is that limitation. And, it's difficult when you know as much as you do. Can you imagine asking someone, a surgeon or somebody, to explain it on the air?
Yeah. And that's what that's what I'm working on, right? So this is an audio format. We're on the radio, right? Mm-hmm. But the website, HomeWiseRadio.com, not quite there yet, but we'll have video on it. There will be supplemental materials. So when I talk about ideas, I reference, do this differently, but then we don't really unpack that to the degree that it needs to be unpacked, because I really can't do it in this format. You can find that on the website.
Yeah. There's like little lights that go off, like, okay,
and
you're going to see more at the website there on that one, or this or that.
And then the experts that we bring in to help us unpack ideas. Each week we've got somebody that we interview, we have a conversation with, and I strive to get the very best. And this week is no different. So
you got a great one coming in.
What I'm going to do is we're going to jump into a few things, because a lot has happened this past week in the news this is the first week of December. And the first week of the month is generally when news and new data and things like that comes out. So there was a few things that I just, kind of jumped out at me. So we got some new housing numbers, pending home sales down again month over month and year over year, what we would expect, okay? In the personal financial arena, so this is what's interesting, because these are some of the things that I really focus on. Things like personal savings rate is down, again, has been coming down.
This is the rate at which people are saving or keeping their savings?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a metric. It's an indicator that economists look at to determine. It kind of helps them determine what the health of a household is. Okay. So households that are saving a lot of money are thought to be healthier than households that aren't saving money. And so now remember, this is an index, so it's a whole bunch, all wrapped together. Okay. And so it's been coming down steadily since the economy opened up, right? So during the pandemic, over the last 2 years, it had reached record highs, right? Because we couldn't go out, we couldn't spend any money. The government was giving us a lot of money. People were just taking it, putting it in the bank. Yeah. And so those numbers had gone up. Now they've come way back down. And also at the same time, we're seeing credit card usage and debt rise. Okay. And the way that we see personal savings rate going down to historic lows, I think currently number is somewhere around 2%. Credit card debt usage is at record levels.
Oh my!
So, the wide change over such a short period of time. I mean, economists don't live month to month the way that a lot of things they do and look at are trends. So to see these trends change like this, I've spoken in the past about market distortions and what's happened the last couple of years and what the Fed's done, and all of that. It creates distortions, and these distortions ripple throughout our entire economy. And so the news, from that is consumer spending, right? So we just had Black Friday.
Yeah.
And, record numbers again set. But consumers are spending on debt. It's debt, so it's not real dollars.
Wow.
All right.
That's a big one. And you're hitting me right between the eyes, buddy.
It's not unusual. Well, it hits everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, myself included. Okay. So it's not, they're just, they're just numbers. So these are the things that we will, we'll keep eyes on. We got some monetary numbers in this past week. Inflation came in lower than expected. And so the way that works is there's a monthly reading. You take 12 months readings, add them together. That's one of the metrics that the Fed uses to try and gauge that. Okay. So this last piece of data we got for October replaced October's number last year. And so I think it was 0.5 versus 0.2. Okay, that doesn't mean anything. Don't worry about that. what you need to know is that it was a net reduction from the prior year. All right. And so based on that and a bunch of other information, the Fed, Jerome Powell, comes out and says that we expect to begin reducing rate hikes. Now, I'm paraphrasing. Okay?
Yeah.
He didn't actually say that.
I remember hearing that in the news, though, that we were leaning that way. Code.
Right. It's in code. And so we get readings from that in stock market and bond market and things like that. Mm-hmm. Generally, that's thought to be a healthier thing when rates are going to come down. And that's what people hear, but understand that's not what he said.
Interesting.
He said rate hikes slowing down, or I think the number is 75 we were expecting, now we're expecting 50.
Okay.
So it's still increasing. It's just not increasing at the same rate.
Because these were rolling up, these hikes, right? And then there was fear about that.
Right. And interestingly enough, inflation is the same way. When we think of inflation coming down is not the same thing as prices coming down. It's the rate at which prices are going up is slowing down. Okay?
Okay.
And so, that is kind of the crux of the question that I thought this week. So I was sitting in the gas station yesterday, and you get out, you put the gas thing in the car, and then because it's chilly out, right?
Yes.
And I don't like to stand around in the cold. I'm a tropical guy. So I get back in the car, right? And I don't think you're supposed, there's signs that say don't do that, but
yes.
Come on. Come on, man. All right.
By the way, Mike, had you gotten a drink? Because that would be icy and it's cold. Did you go in and get a drink? Because I cannot resist at the convenience market getting a drink.
No.
Okay.
I mean, that's
just back in the car.
Well, we're in a time of inflation, and people are trying to cut back wherever they can.
You're right. That little thing every day.
Again, myself not excluded.
Yes.
I'm a common person.
You got to splurge every once in a while. By the way, that's Michael Miget.
Right.
You're listening to HomeWise Radio. I'm Paul Cook. Yeah, check out HomeWiseRadio.com if you're not already there. Okay, we're at the gas station.
Right. So I'm at the gas station. I'm putting gas in the car, and I'm thinking, I got the radio going because I listen to, 101.9 in the background, pretty much wherever I go.
Nice.
And I am thinking about this, and I'm wondering, what? I know that, once this starts to subside, you're going to see gas prices come down. But I got to thinking, right? I go, do you really think that as inflation comes down, as we return more to a normal thing, are you really going to see the prices on stuff that we buy every day go down?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And, so I'm sitting at the gas station, I'm in my car. So I think of a car example, right? And when we talk about prices, we're talking about commodity prices. So things like gas,
Mm-hmm. Things that kind of fluctuate.
Right. They fluctuate with the market. But there are the prices of other things that go into produce the things that we buy that aren't so tied to those inflationary fluctuations in the market. Okay. And so if you think about it, I'm sitting in a car, I'm thinking like, okay, cars made out of steel, right? So
yes.
Got to buy steel to make the car. The steel is a commodity. Yeah. The price of steel is going to fluctuate. But car parts, right? So you're going to take the raw material, you're going to create parts. And some of those are going to be sensitive to that, but others aren't because there's specialty, input, intellectual property, things like that, that bake into that. And then you have the car itself. And as you move from pure commodity to end product, you start to get the pieces of the puzzle that aren't going to come down, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking of wages. It's unlikely that you're going to see wages come down.
Okay.
Right? And so now I know this is a potentially inflammatory subject because everybody knows somebody that's either lost their job or something changed, they got consolidated out of a job. I know that happens.
Oh, yeah.
In this, that happens a lot. All right. But understand, when we're looking at, these indexes in the news and things like that, they're looking at the ordinary, everyday, average American worker.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so if we take the guys making cars, we take the guys on lines, the guy, you know, doing like the everyday, like the office work, people, you know, just your average everyday person, they make X, okay, and they don't, you know, they don't get, most don't get like a pure cost of living adjustment, right? So inflation was this, and so you're going to make extra this to make up for that.
I wish.
Right. The way that a Social Security check will go up like that and be indexed to that. But they do make more money over time, generally speaking, because, you know, and I can see it because I work with people and their income 31 years now. I have people that I've tracked over time. I've done multiple things with. So I've got W-2s from each year, right? And I can see them, you know, they made X and made a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. And that's just kind of the way it goes. Same job, a little, you know, you know, a little bit more money. And those inputs aren't quite as sensitive to inflation, right? And so if you think about it, you know, like when was the last time you heard, you know, somebody getting a pay cut, like a pure pay cut, like same job, but we're just going to pay you less now. Times are tough, and you know, you actually hear the opposite. You know, you hear we're raising the minimum wage, got to have a living wage. You know, it's
there's
like,
a lot of that talk,
the pressure,
like not
the
going
talk
down.
is all the opposite direction. Which, by the way, those kinds of things tend to be inflationary. Okay, so it you know, it can get to be a really complicated subject, but it just got me thinking about.
You're sitting in the car.
Right, I'm sitting in the car, and the idea of, so think about this, all right? You don't see wages come down, but what you do see are, you know, how do I want to put this?
You need one of these grease pencils or Sharpie on the window. I see a beautiful mind and a lot of figures coming out.
Right, I see, in front of a grease board, right, a whiteboard. What you see is doing the same, doing a larger job, doing more work for the same amount of money, like increasing worker productivity, right? Sometimes through technology, sometimes just through you're working more hours, right? It's a form of shrinkflation. Now, we're all familiar with that in the food example. Okay?
Yeah.
And, you know, smaller packages, same price, or smaller packages, a little bit higher price and stuff like that.
More packaging, less product.
Right. So when inflation goes back and things start to normalize, do you really think that you're going to see those prices come back down? Like, do you think you're going to see packages return to the size that they were?
Yeah.
Without the accompanying price increase.
Yeah. You're right. You know, just generally speaking, they don't go back to it. Like, well, now we're going to start putting a few more Cheetos in the bag and less air.
Yeah.
Those kind of things just don't happen.
These kinds of things tend to not undo themselves. Okay? Prices once raised tend to stay there. Now, they may not go up at the same rate they might have gone up before, but they don't go backwards. And that is the crux of the point that I'm trying to make is don't get confused that inflation is the speed at which something is increasing. It's not the speed of the thing, right?
Okay.
In order for prices to come down, you'd need to see deflation. And that's just not going to happen.
We're measuring that speed. That's really fascinating. So don't expect it. Don't expect these prices to come down or you to get more product. I'm really excited to hear what our guest thinks of all of this coming up next. Also, more on this subject, which is really fascinating. And we got to figure out what really, the thinking fully in the car there. You're exactly right. I mean, it's like, wow. Looking at all the things around you in the car, you know what I mean? And just all that goes into that. And I don't know if you're totally talking about that, but that's hitting me. My name is Paul Cook. You're listening to HomeWiseRadio.com, episode 8 with Michael Miget, and we will be right back. Also, make sure you check out HomeWiseRadio.com. We're just getting started.
You're listening to HomeWise Radio.
He said it. You're listening to HomeWise Radio. My name is Paul Cook, and Michael Miget is the host, HomeWiseRadio.com. We were talking a little bit about expectations in our last break, about expecting things to change, and I know that's what you and our guests kind of are always trying to gauge, where things are headed and the rate at which they are headed, and that was some unique information, and that's what's cool. Go back to HomeWiseRadio.com, and you can listen to that segment. If not, I know we'll retouch on it as we continue. But Michael, you've got a guest you brought in here.
I do. In the studio, I have Mark Gellman, the Gellman team with eXp Realty. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me, fellas.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming out. Appreciate it. We've been talking about, well, every week we talk about something to do with this, but it seems like the narrative has been inflation, prices, what we're experiencing in the market, and it's just such a huge subject. And, I kind of have the financing end of that. We've gone over it ad nauseum. What I wanted to do today, because you are, I think you're the guy to ask this question to, honestly.
The guy.
I appreciate
yes.
that.
The
That's
guy.
a compliment.
We'll see if I deliver.
A big one.
Is give us a more detailed idea of what's going on in the market. But before we get into just like jumping in, why don't you tell us about yourself? And
Sure, I've been in real estate for 13 years. I got into it right as the market was crashing. So it was an interesting time that people ask, well, how is today different from then? Completely different time.
Wow.
2008, 15 months of inventory. Today, less than a month and a half of inventory in any market. So totally different. It's just it's something we've never seen before. And the reason we've never seen this market, 2008, severe buyer's market, 15 months of inventory. Yet today, where inventory is less than the month and a half, very weak, traditionally considered an extreme seller's market, but there's also a demand issue because as interest rates have risen, can I blame it on you or no?
you can try. I wish I had that kind of control.
But the uniqueness is, as interest rates have risen, it really has halted the market in many cases. So the uniqueness that we're seeing today is that there's a significant amount of homes still that are selling just like they were 6 months ago. Multiple offers, over asking, limited contingencies. But the uniqueness is these other great homes, maybe a little deferred maintenance, a little dated, those homes are sitting and even taking price adjustments and not selling.
Wow.
So it's one of the most unique markets where there's just two ends of the spectrum, unlike 2008.
Right.
What a difference that must be for you. Like you said, you started in that. Did you imagine it would get to this point? I want to hear about that. Like, you've seen so much change over your time.
Sure. So it's interesting. First of all, there's the old saying, what goes up must come down. So a lot of people over the last year and a half, there's no way this market's going to soften because of supply and demand. Mm-hmm. Significantly far less homes being built, being vacated over the years. You have investors that are competing and buying, institutional investors buying these homes. So the inventory availability was significantly less that people would question, how's the market going to change? The biggest change that happened was the interest rates, which then goes into your whole inflation and then what the Fed policy. So it's all tied together. People did not predict it in this quickly, because interest rates shot up so quickly. Again, well, we won't blame it on Michael, but we'll kind of give him some credit. But that's what nobody expected interest rates to double or more as quickly as they did.
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up, Mark, because again, 31 years, and I've been anticipating this the whole time. Like, as soon as, with what we went through with the record high markets, record low interest rates, just about a record on everything. In fact, never before has the U.S. economy been shut down before, right? So the whole thing is a grand experiment.
let me ask, what did you do before then? You said 13 years, if you don't mind saying.
Sure,
Mark.
I started out out of college, Indiana University, go Hoosiers,
Yeah.
a CPA.
Okay.
And then I worked in the, we own a shoe business also, and I started the internet division of that, sold it, was a real estate investor, and migrated from a real estate investor to a full-time real estate professional, and I ended up building a pretty sizable team. We've sold over 4,000 homes, about $1.6 billion of sales. So,
Man, you went the right direction, it sounds like, Mark.
it worked out well. I'm excited.
Yeah,
Great.
I think, it has a lot to do with the person behind it. If you are the kind of person, that's oriented to success, you're going to succeed in whatever you do. And if you're not, well, you're not. So, I'm listening to you and I'm pulling out, just a couple of things here. So you don't see a bubble crash or whatever we would hear about in the news.
Sure. So it is completely different from 2008.
Right.
Certainly, we're
That's
seeing a significant softening. So there's no doubt about it. We're seeing seller and buyers, the disconnect between the two, because you have sellers selling today that are frustrated that their neighbor sold for X as is 6 months ago. You have buyers that's heard the news, the market's crashing. And so now buyers are writing offers that look different than 6 months ago. Their motivation's different. So there's really a disconnect. However, even this last couple weeks, we've seen interest rates go down a little bit. Again, if we're going to blame the rise on you, we'll give you some credit. Thanks for helping to lower them. But
Fed Chairman Michael Miget.
an increase in buyer demand by the movement of interest rates. There's a psychology when they hit 7, which they're below, but there was this psychology, first off, when they hit 5, or even 4, and then they hit 5, and then they hit 6 and 7. So now that they softened, there was some positive movement. So I think the uniqueness about this market right now, it's a fragile market. It can go either way. It can change on a dime, and we just have to pay attention to it. Earlier, you were asking about what we project is going to happen. We certainly don't have a crystal ball, but we're paying attention to 3 specific things: interest rates, the overall economy, stock market, and other, and inventory levels. Those 3 things will impact what's going to happen as we go into the spring market, as we finish up the 4th quarter. Those 3 things, interest rates, overall economy, and the stock market and inventory levels, are going to have the greatest impact.
Yeah. One of the things that we talk about on the show are how the family home works as an investment, the investment angle to it. And thinking back to the Great Recession, so this is, extension of that initial question about the bubble, what do you see for that? People are afraid to buy because they think that prices are high, they're going to come down because they're listening to the news and they're hearing bubble talk, crash talk, when that's not necessarily supported by the metrics of what's in the market. We're not seeing the same thing. It's a different market, just like you said. But there's people that need to buy now, want to buy now. They're looking for that house, but they're kind of holding off because they're not sure, because they're not getting the counseling, or they're not, they're just not hearing the right thing. I mean, what would you say to them?
Sure. So we've actually changed our whole marketing communication. So versus it's a great time to buy, it's a great time to sell. Most real estate agents will create 2 videos. It's a great time to buy. And then the next one right after, it's a great time to sell. That's a little peculiar, but that's marketing 101 that doesn't work.
Right.
We actually went away from that. Number 1, is it a good time to buy or sell? It's a great time to buy or sell if it's a great time for you and your family to buy or sell. Meaning, you're upsizing, you're downsizing, you're moving into the market, out of the market. You want this sense of home ownership. It's a great time. By the way, yes, it's the greatest source of the equity. It's the greatest source of an investment of building and nest egg over time. But anybody that's listening that believes that this is their best investment today, it may not be. And the reason is this is going to create memories. It's way bigger than simply an investment. I own a lot of real estate, a lot of investment, and that when you own a multifamily, you own a building that's revenue producing, that's an investment. But a house over time absolutely is a great opportunity to build equity, pay down the note, get deductions where appropriate for taxes and other. And ultimately, it's a great place that we hope still over time is there in an opportunity. What happened in 2008 is, unfortunately, loans were being made to people that didn't have business at that point buying it. And then what would happen is when interest rates went up and they reset the loans, they couldn't afford them. So it all starts with making sure, which I know you guys do a great job, you're underwriting, you're making sure you're advising people not what you're qualified for, but what's your comfort level of your loan payment. And I mean, I know that's part of what you do. You're an advisor. So I hope I answered your question over time, but it's not as black and white as just to say, buy now, sell now. It's when it's right for you all, and over time, it's going to be a great opportunity to see appreciation.
Right. And that's, I don't always just so everybody is clear, I don't always know how these answers are going to come out.
Mm-hmm. On the radio.
I think that it's healthy to have other ideas, other points of view, other perspectives. When we talked about the experts segment that a couple weeks ago, different experts, different viewpoints, but in other ways, they're the same.
Yeah.
Right.
And so interesting.
There are absolutely other reasons to own a house other than investment. There's an emotional aspect. There's it makes a person a person.
And you were saying weeks ago, a dwelling, you were talking about, this is your home if it's right for you, which is kind of what you're saying. And right. Mark Gellman is saying right now too.
Right. And if it's the right time, you should not be afraid to buy.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're being forced, or if you're being forced to move, like if you're relocating, to feel bad about that. Okay. Even if we look back at the Great Recession, which was the worst real estate market that any of us will have ever experienced.
Good. Hopefully.
The time from trough, meaning the bottom of that market, to when it recovered.
Yeah.
Or maybe it would be from the peak to the trough and then back to a recovery period, could have been as short as a few years or as long. I mean, it was less than 10 years, depending on where you owned and where you bought at, right? So I told the story about owning in South Florida, a pre-construction there wasn't a worse thing that I could have done, right? So I made every mistake in the book, but it has come back. And I don't own it anymore. If I went, I can look and see that it came all the way back. And so, that's that idea of if you have to have a roof over your head, so you're either going to own something or you're going to pay rent, right? You're not going to escape that cost. If you have a family, you can't live with mom and dad with the family and, everything like that. But somebody's going to incur that cost somewhere. Mm-hmm. It's just who's going to incur it. But if we're comparing apples to apples, buying makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so that's the point.
And there's no doubt about it when you're talking about renting versus owning. I mean, the fact is there's an old saying that the interest rate on renting is 100%. The other thing is the impact of inflation. Once you're in your home, don't get me wrong, there's, taxes are going to go up and other repairs and other, but ultimately we are seeing rents, and that's why it's attractive to own multifamily and other in this type of environment, because rents are continuing to increase. So there is a stability. If you can afford that home, there is a lot of stability.
Right. And I think that's also the key, is if you can afford it. So we're not suggesting that you go out and buy something that you can't afford, or if you're taking a rate today that's higher than what they might be in the future. anticipating that, hey, you know what, I'm going to refinance into a payment that's affordable over the long term. It's not what we're talking about. If you can afford it, if it makes sense, what you can do now, don't be afraid because you think it might be a bad investment.
Because of where we are right now.
Because, my experience with trying to time the market, it's a fool's game.
You're spot on. There is absolutely no way to time this market.
Right.
And I've sat on stocks to relate it to stock market. I've sat on stocks that I never bought because they kept going up. And then I sat out, waited for it to go down. It never. And I've also gone the other way. I own stocks quite high. They were going down. They'll stop going down. And I rode it all the way down. You can't time. You have to be consistent. And again, if it's the right time for you and your family to own a home, buy a home.
I agree.
And use an expert, right? Because there's many ways, both of you guys, there's many ways you can, you're going to cheat yourself out of money on this huge element of your financial future. That is so fascinating, Mark Gellman, about it's got to be right for you. And anytime you try to time something out and you think that's when you get bit, huh?
My experience has shown me not to time things. That's why in investments, I dollar cost average. I put the same amount in every month. Sometimes it goes up, some it goes down. But over time, you'll have stability.
That's Mark Gellman. We're listening to HomeWise Radio with Michael Miget. He's our main host. Michael, what are we going to talk about in this third segment? Can you tell us?
It's a secret.
It's a secret. We'll be right back. You got to hear.
Yeah. Hey, one more thing before we go, Mark. How would we get a hold of you if we wanted to talk to you?
Sure, I appreciate. The easiest thing to do would be to Google the Gellman team. TheGellmanteam. You'll notice we have 750 five-star reviews on Google, so it's an easy place to find us. My phone number is 314-578-1123. Again, 314-578-1123. And by the way, am I being kicked out, or do I get to stick around for a minute?
We're not kicking you out, but we're up against a hard break here, and I just want to make sure that we had the contact information in case. I'm going to call you.
Cool.
Me too, man. It's impressive.
Thank you. Google the Gellman team.
He's part of the secret coming up in the third segment. Stay right there. HomeWise Radio with Michael Miget. You have been listening to HomeWise Radio with Michael Miget and our esteemed guest, Mark Gellman from the Gellman team, and we're having a stimulating conversation here. And I know, Michael, you had more questions for Mark.
I do, and it's really just kind of I always try to bring value to people, and
Indeed.
I've got my lane. I invite the experts in to get their take on things, and there's something that it kind of been bouncing around in my head since we were talking in the last segment and even into the beginning segment when I opened up and we were talking about the complexity of the markets, right? So multifaceted, multi-different markets kind of all converging together to create the environment within which we have to live our financial lives, all right? And, you multiple times, Mark, you said something akin to, we haven't seen this before. It's unusual. It's unique. There's a disconnect. When I hear that, I just think, number one, I feel and see and experience a lot of the same things in my market. When the Fed comes out and speaks and bonds start going crazy, like years worth of fluctuation happens over the course of a couple of hours. It's like we've never seen anything like that before. I have multiple services feeding me data in real time, and they can't even keep up in real time, right? And we're trying to make decisions, do the best things we can for clients. That's where experience comes in and knowing what that is going to be, trying to anticipate things ahead of time so that we're ready to go. Because it's not always like, hey, I want to do that, and boom, we can just do that at the drop of a hat. Sometimes there's a little bit of plan. To do it right takes a little bit of planning. And so unique market, I don't think this is something where you want an inexperienced agent, So like you were talking about how to sell a house, like the right house, how to put it up or whatever. what would you do to sell a house today in today's market?
Sure. So, and first off, I appreciate there's a lot of great agents out there, but I think at the end of the day, you have to interview the agent that has the experience. And again, there's plenty with experience. But here's the thing. We've actually taken a very consistent approach that allowed us to sell over 4,000 homes over our career. That consistent approach we've taken is preparation for sale, marketing to the highest level, over communicating with our clients in the market. And so, by the way, even in the perceived worst market or the best market, when it was easier to sell homes, we still took that approach because we never wanted there to be wow, we love this home, but it would have been better to prepare it for sale because all this deferred maintenance and other, even though in a strong market, some of that didn't have to be done. We've been one that have always taken a consistent approach. So even of vacant homes, we traditionally stage vacant homes. Even in the hot market, in the early spring market of 2022, we still staged vacant homes. I own a lot of investment properties. I buy investments. I fix and flip homes. I still stage it. Does it need staging? A lot of them don't. But I don't want to err on the side of missing something because your window of opportunity, when you put a home on the market that's not prepared for sale, it is a problem. 90% of home buyers start their search on the internet. Unlike 10 years ago, the internet wasn't being as used. It was certainly starting to be used. But today, the first showings are on the internet. People coming into the market, people leaving the market. So what happens is you have to put your best foot forward. We've been one to always do that. Then when you get into negotiating and once you do get that contract, it's not as easy as just getting the contract, go to closing. There's multiple contingencies throughout the process.
There are.
You need an expert that's going to, number one, educate the buyer, the seller about the contingencies, navigate through those contingencies, and the best of the best agents are getting homes closed at prices that exceed the overall market average, and they're closing a higher percent of homes than the agent that's not as seasoned. I don't know if that helped you, but again, my philosophy is prepare the home for sale, put the best foot forward, and when we're talking about prepare, if it has deferred maintenance, get the deferred maintenance fixed. Don't rely on the consumer to look at a home and overestimate how much it's going to cost to redo the whole home, to see there's some wood rot and other. Oh, and then it may only be $1,000, $500, but the consumer may think it's $4,500. So again, preparation for sale, highest level of marketing possible because of the internet, in person, offline. So for somebody like us, we do huge online presence, but equally, we're in a lot of the magazines and other things, postcarding that's old school, but we don't know where our buyer's going to come. So we really want to hit every opportunity.
And you know what? I can verify that because last night I looked through local media, like just like if I'm not working, like I'm working on that, right? And I saw you in just an obscure magazine, like holy cow, like he's even here, right? So.
Nobody's falling.
Right.
He wants to catch it all.
Right.
That's really cool.
We do. I mean,
right. And understand it, right? It's all of this helps me, but more importantly, it helps our listeners, right? So I want to be a source of unbiased, just honest, straightforward, and when appropriate, actionable information. But I'm going to, this is a show of strategy, right? And I'm always thinking strategy. As I'm listening to you speak, I'm like, I hear the music, like it's just going off like boom, boom, boom. Like you're hitting on every tenet of the core idea that I wanted to have this show be about. Okay.
Strategy.
Perfect example. During the height of the market, a vacant home, sure, we could sell it without staging it, right? Most agents, and maybe I'm wrong about that, but I know at least some because I was involved with some. But there are some, would the typical agent go to the expense, the trouble, the extra work to stage a vacant house? not because you didn't need it to get it sold. What you needed was to get it sold for the top dollar that it could sell for.
The
right?
highest price, the shortest amount of time, and the widest consumer base. So it's not just one or the other.
Right.
The other thing is where people fall short is if we didn't stage that home and it doesn't sell, then a week, 3 weeks later, we then we stage it and then rebrand it. You've already missed your opportunity. I don't want to miss my opportunity. We put our best foot forward. So you see a lot of agents are chasing their tail. That's why price adjustments. When they don't know what else to do, they drop the price. An interesting thing that we're seeing right now in lieu of price adjustments and in lieu of prices is in your world. We're seeing these buy downs.
Yep.
What is a buy down, please?
We have talked about those ad nauseum before. Every kind of buy down.
Yeah.
Okay. So just a buy down, it can mean different things, okay? So there's the permanent version and there's the temporary version, all right? But they all function generally, they are money that generally comes from the seller given to the buyer to facilitate their agreement to close on a home at a certain price, okay? If it's a permanent buy down, that money is being taken, it's buying down the interest rate, and we are able to use that money to not only get it's not just about getting a lower interest rate, it's about getting the right lower interest rate, okay? Because just more money and more money and more money at a certain point, you're chasing a harder and harder to hit target because rates, there's a sweet spot that they should be at, what I call the point of maximum efficiency, right? Mm-hmm. So now we're getting into nerd land, right? Which is where I live. There's a right thing for that, right? So by doing that, we can significantly reduce, minimize, whatever you want to call it, the cost of owning that home over its term, right? Mm-hmm. That feeds that top line tenet of maximizing what your home is going to mean to you when you retire, right? Where your net worth stands out. Temporary buy down, it doesn't really... It's reflected in an interest rate reduction, but there's no leverage with it, meaning there's no investment value to the money that the seller is giving you to put into it. It's just a dollar for dollar buy down of the rate reflected in a reduced payment when that, and it's a pool of cash that's set aside. Once that pool runs out, then the payments go back. They figure it out so that either after 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, that pool is exhausted, and then the loan sits at the note rate that it's written for. Okay, two completely different things that sort of get you to the right place. Which one to use? Well, it depends on your situation.
Little levers there that you can control.
It depends on what you believe is going to happen in the beginning, and that answer is gonna vary based on what your needs and goals are and the client. Okay, so that's why you got to do an analysis. You can't just blanket give advice and do that. It's the advantage that I have. It's the advantage that Mark has. We are not just guys on the radio trying to help people out, but we actually sit down face to face with people and can do the due diligence with them that needs to be done in order to give them the best thing to do. But with you, what you're doing, going to the extremes, applying a proven process, because you've got the track record to prove it, that maximizes what a home will sell for. That's the bookend on that core transaction. And between the time you buy a house and between the time you sell your house, those fluctuations really don't matter.
I would agree. I think that ultimately there's an old saying, if you were an investor, you have to buy right. And certainly as a primary residence, you want to buy right. But as you suggest, over time, it works out. We've seen that how home prices continue to increase. Your home in Florida that you were referring to is worth more today than it was in the height in 2004, 5, 6. So over time, can you time it? You can't. But ultimately, it's a great place to be.
I tried. I tried to time it.
Yeah,
And,
you did.
And
it sounded
just,
right.
Well, it
all
felt,
the factors.
it felt right. And let me tell you, when you're in the middle of it and you're in that extreme pain, and this is why you need an advisor to bounce ideas off of. At the time, I did not. I was my own advisor, right? And there's a saying that goes with that. I'm not going to say it, but what the lawyer, something about the person who's his own lawyer has a fool for a client, something like that. Mark, how would we get a hold of you again?
Sure. Again, Mark Gellman, the Gellman team. Google us. You'll see 5-star rating, over 750 5-star reviews. We're excited to have been on your show. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Paul, for having me. If any of your listeners want to reach out just for information, I mean, we don't charge for that. There's no commitment. Reach out. This is my passion. I love talking about it. So we're here for you.
I can tell.
I can tell too. I mean, it's really we're honored that you came in today, and it was really, really cool to see that passion and the experience, and not just all talk.
I appreciate that.
And if you want to get a hold of me, mortgage website, goshelter.com. Direct phone line 314-275-0314.
All right, that's Michael Miget, HomeWise Radio, HomeWiseRadio.com. If you want to get a hold of me, just talk to him, and he'll get me through. You're also on Facebook.
I'm on Facebook, too, HomeWise Radio with Michael Miget. Like it, follow it, share it, spread the word.
All right, from Michael, and many thanks to Mark Gellman, I'm Paul Cook. Thanks so much for listening.
HomeWise with Michael Miget.
Loan and loan information provided by Michael Miget, NMLS number 205402, and Shelter Mortgage, Inc., 691 Trade Center Boulevard, Chesterfield, Missouri, 63005, NMLS number 192609, a Missouri residential mortgage license.